Power is when we have every justification to kill, and we don't.
Hey, what's up everyone, it's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're gonna be taking a look at Schindler's List. I think when you look at the film, it falls into the very unique category of being all around great and super iconic, but at the same time a difficult rewatch because of just how heavy the subject matter is. Though in saying that, with the rise of anti-Semitism and hate in general, there may be no better time than now to revisit the movie and its brutal depiction of the Holocaust. On that note, let's get right into the video. Here are 30 facts you didn't know about Schindler's List. Although Liam Neeson never disputed how iconic of a film Schindler's List turned out to be, in terms of his own performance, he was super unhappy. According to Neeson, what it all boiled down to was Spielberg having a very specific vision for his character, which may have led to some micromanaging. Neeson remembered how he'd be telling him when to blow out smoke and even when to breathe. It went so far that Neeson had to say, "I can't handle this, I'm not a puppet," though it seems doubtful that helped much if any. When it came to filming the scenes that took place in Auschwitz, they originally planned to shoot inside the actual Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. Everything was set to go with the concentration camp already being recreated when certain people in the World Jewish Congress got wind of Spielberg's plans. Their major concern was that the activity of commercial filming on the site where millions of Jews were exterminated would only serve to desecrate the area. A meeting was held, after which Spielberg totally abandoned the idea of filming inside the camp, and instead rebuilt the whole thing just outside the gates.
She's just going to Auschwitz number 2 anyway. What difference does it make?
It's not got Auschwitz. I'd never do that to her.
The liquidation of the Krakow ghetto was in many ways the turning point of the film, which gave us a taste of things to come. But when it came to the original script, the entire scene only took up around 2 pages. Spielberg had this thought that the sequence had to be almost unwatchable. So in turn, when he found out the screenwriter had only written a measly 2 pages for such a crucial scene, he had to revise the whole thing. The result was an increase from about 2 pages to 7, with the new runtime spanning over 15 minutes. One of the scenes that got added in the rewrite also happens to be a favorite of mine. A soldier beautifully playing the piano set against the backdrop of gunfire and pandemonium all around him. And despite the one soldier purportedly knowing what composer it's from,
Is this Bach? Is this Bach? Nein, Mozart. Mozart? Yeah.
the piece is actually Bach's English Suite No. 2 in A minor. Because Steven Spielberg and John Williams have worked together on nearly all his movies, they planned to do the same thing for Schindler's List. But after viewing a rough cut of the film, Williams began to have second thoughts. He recalled walking in circles, barely able to speak, and then finally muttering to Spielberg, "I really think you need a better composer than I am for this film." To which Spielberg responded, "I know, but they're all dead." In order to dress the more than 20,000 extras, the costume designer took out newspaper advertisements in Krakow, asking to buy any clothing people had from the 30s and 40s. And because economic conditions in post-communist Poland were not so good, they had no problem acquiring a plethora of World War II attire. The actress who played the girl in the red coat, Olivia Dabrowska, was only 3 years old when she took on the role of a lifetime. Obviously, as she was too young to watch the film at such an age, Dabrowska made a promise to Spielberg that she would only watch the film once she turned 18. If you know anything about kids, that had about a 0% chance of coming true, and unsurprisingly, she watched it at 11 years old and was traumatized by the experience. Due to the subject matter of Schindler's List, the vibe on set was understandably very heavy and solemn. Spielberg described how there were no jokes on set, no funny bloopers to show at the wrap party. Every single day was like waking up and going to hell. As you can imagine, this put Spielberg under a ton of stress, so he came up with 2 methods to help lighten the mood. The first was a weekly phone call with Robin Williams. Well, to be fair, Williams was the one who reached out knowing what he was going through, and thus performed 15 minutes of stand-up a week all on the house. Spielberg noted how he would always hang up on the loudest laugh, which is now something I want to personally try out. The other way Spielberg cheered himself up was by watching episodes of Seinfeld. And funny enough, Jerry Seinfeld later said he heard this very story and as a result decided to include Schindler's List in the episode The Raincoats.
Like that? What about the end with the list?
Yeah, that was some list.
Beside talking to Robin Williams and watching Seinfeld, Spielberg had another distraction from the horrors of Schindler's List. Only this was one he didn't enjoy. 2 or 3 times a week after a 12-hour day of shooting and eating dinner with the wife and kids, he would sit at his monitor and do post-production work on Jurassic Park. In his mind, he was like, how can I reconcile dinosaurs and the Holocaust? In the end, it was almost impossible to juggle the emotional weight of the Holocaust alongside dinosaurs chasing jeeps, so it led to a ton of anger and resentment on his part. Although, after Jurassic Park came out and turned into the biggest box office hit ever, Spielberg said a lot of that went away. During a meeting between Oskar Schindler and Itzhak Stern,
But they wouldn't own it. I'd own it. I'd pay them back in product, pots and pans.
Stern says this.
I'm sure I don't know anybody who'll be interested in this.
In response, Schindler tells him they should be, and if you listen closely, you can hear the sound of a train whistle hinting at the future that awaits people who don't take his offer.
Well, they should be. It's extra. Tell them they should be.
Sadly, although nearly half a century had passed since the end of the Holocaust, the cast and crew still dealt with anti-Semitism during shooting. Upon encountering Ralph Fiennes in uniform, one woman proclaimed, "The Germans were charming people. They didn't kill anybody who didn't deserve it." Another incident went down when a German businessman approached an Israeli actor and told him Hitler should have finished the job, leading Ben Kingsley to nearly attack the man before he was held back. Beyond that, there were at times anti-Semitic symbols on billboards near shooting locations. But in the face of all that, during Passover, all the German and Israeli actors came together to learn and share in the festivities. In terms of actors who really brought the film to life, you have to put Ralph Fiennes on the top of that list. Not only did he capture the sick and depraved nature of the Nazi war criminal, but as you can see by these pictures, he was also able to capture the look of the man to a very convincing degree. In fact, when survivor Mila Pfefferberg met Fiennes in full Nazi attire, she started shaking and had to be held up because he reminded her too much of the real Amon Goeth. This detail seems pretty obvious watching it back now, but I somehow totally overlooked it on previous viewings. Looking at the road to the Plazhov concentration camp, you can see that it was paved with tombstones. And crazy enough, this is also somewhat historically accurate, as evidence of the Nazis doing this has been unearthed on more than one occasion. The first attempt at getting the film made goes all the way back to 1963, when Poldek Pfefferberg, one of the Schindler Juden, contacted MGM. The deal eventually fell through and no real progress was made on the story till 1980, when a certain Thomas Keneally walked into Pfefferberg's leather goods store in Los Angeles. They got to talking, one thing led to another, he found out Keneally was a writer and told him, "Then I have a story for you." At first, Keneally thought it was complete bullshit cause everyone thinks they got a great story. But after listening to his tale, he's of course astounded. Fast forward 2 years and Schindler's Ark is published. The following year, Spielberg gets notified about the book, and just like Keneally, he's blown away by the story and figures he has to meet this Pfefferberg. They meet and Spielberg agrees to make the film, but with a catch. He said it'd have to wait 10 years. So the main reason that Spielberg didn't want to make the film back in '83 was just because he wasn't emotionally ready, as he was only 37 years old. Making matters worse over the years was the fact that Pfefferberg kept calling and heaping on the fact that he was going to die. This obviously gave Spielberg a guilty conscience, which led to him trying to pass the film off to other directors. The first was Roman Polanski, who had actually lived in the Krakow ghetto until his escape during the liquidation. His mother, who was 4 months pregnant, wasn't so lucky and was killed in Auschwitz soon after arriving. Because the subject matter was so deeply personal, he had to decline. Martin Scorsese was another director who got very close to doing Schindler's List. Things were basically set in stone when Spielberg, who was directing a remake of Cape Fear, had a change of heart. So he and Scorsese swapped films, and the rest is history. What finally made Spielberg sign on to the film was a dramatic increase in attention being given to Holocaust deniers, and in conjunction with that, world events like the fall of the Berlin Wall and Bosnian concentration camps, all of which made clear to him that people were forgetting the lessons of hatred and intolerance from the Holocaust.
By this evening, those 6 centuries are a rumor.
Because Holocaust films were not considered a profitable genre, the budget for Schindler's List was set at a paltry $22 million, barely a third of the funding given to Spielberg's previous film, Jurassic Park. though to Spielberg it barely mattered. He even went so far as to guarantee Universal they'd lose all their money. That's how pessimistic he was about the readiness of the culture to accept a film surrounding racial hatred. He also refused to accept any money made from the film, calling it blood money, and followed through on that promise by donating all the proceeds to different charities and museums. After collaborating with Harrison Ford on the Indiana Jones trilogy, Spielberg offered him the role of Oscar Schindler. However, Ford turned it down for a couple reasons. He figured the person needed to be non-Jewish, and he also feared that it would be hard for people to overlook him as Indiana Jones to see the importance of the film. Spielberg agreed with Ford's assessment and vowed not to cast someone whose star power might overshadow the movie. Thus, when Kevin Costner supposedly wanted to do the movie for free, and Mel Gibson inquired about taking on the part, he had to decline simply on the basis that they were too well known. When it came to Liam Neeson, he had auditioned for the role early on, though it wasn't until Spielberg, his wife Kate, and her mother went to see him in a play that everything changed. At the end of the play, they all went backstage to see him, and Neeson greeted his mother-in-law with a kiss on both cheeks, which made him think that's exactly what Oscar Schindler would have done. It was enough to convince him, and a week later he had a Schindler.
It's all right. It's not that kind of a kiss.
Speaking on casting Ralph Fiennes as Amon Goeth, Spielberg detailed how even though he sent in 3 takes for the audition, he never even had to look at the other 2. In his eyes, Spielberg saw a kind of sexual evil that fit the character perfectly. And to further prepare himself for the role, Fiennes put on 28 pounds by drinking an excess of Guinness. But beyond the physical, Fiennes mentally also had to get into the headspace of the psychopath, and what he discovered very much surprised him. On some level, he came to understand the sense of that power, the order and hierarchy, and the patriotism that drew him in. And a part of him even felt a kind of sympathy for him. All in all, because of how deeply disturbed the man was, and how far Fiennes went into his psyche, he remarked, "I think there was a price to pay for this one."
You're Jewish, bitch. You never talked me into it.
The waiter who greets Schindler was portrayed by Branko Lustig, one of the film's producers and also a Holocaust survivor. His father also worked as a waiter before his eventual death in the Holocaust, and it's honestly a miracle Lustig survived himself, as he weighed in at 66 pounds the day he was liberated.
People died in front of me on the camps. The last words were, "Be a witness of my murder."
So you may be asking, how much of Oscar Schindler's life did the movie get correct? Well, he was a spy for the Nazis during the 1930s. He, of course, did open up a factory which employed Jews, and there's no disputing he saved over 1,200 lives. There were, however, a couple inaccuracies. The first of which involves a fellow by the name of Abraham Bankier. Before Bankier came into the picture, all the workers were non-Jewish Poles. Bankier is the one who gave him the idea to employ Jewish laborers on the basis that they were cheaper than the average Polish worker. The famous Schindler's List, which he oversees in the film, existed in real life. However, Oscar Schindler wasn't there to help with it, as he was in jail on suspicion of bribery. This isn't to take away anything from Schindler though, as you have to remember he was the only reason there was even a list in the first place. And as the movie stated, after the war, his marriage failed, he went broke, and was forced to rely upon the Schindler Juden for financial aid till his death, which I'm sure none of them minded in the least bit.
You want these people?
These people. My people. I want my people.
Who are you, Moses?
Back in 1965, Steven Spielberg enrolled in Cal State Long Beach, spent 3 years there, and left just shy of graduating. 30 years later, he went back to earn his degree so his kids wouldn't call him a hypocrite when he stressed the importance of going to college, and concerning the film school's final requirement to submit an advanced 12-minute polished film. Spielberg turned in Schindler's List, which was barely good enough to get him his degree. Since the movie focused on the Jews and Germans in Poland, Spielberg initially considered shooting the entire thing in Polish and German and using subtitles. Though after some consideration, he figured that doing so would take away too much from what was happening on screen, and didn't want to afford that kind of safety to the audience.
By law, I have to tell you, sir, I'm a Jew. Well, I'm a German, so there we are.
The real Amon Goeth was every bit as terrible as the movie characterized him to be, and then some. In the opening address as the commandant of the Plazhov camp, he proclaimed, "I am your God." Also, many of the terrible atrocities depicted actually took place, like sending all the children in the camp to their death, shooting people who moved too slowly, and killing every second member of a group if someone escaped. There was, however, even more disturbing stories that weren't included in the film, like how he strung prisoners up by their feet and set his dogs on them. At his hanging, the executioner twice miscalculated the length of the rope necessary to hang him, though something tells me he still got off way too easy.
I pardon you.
Although Spielberg himself didn't care about making money off Schindler's List, let's just say that Universal felt a bit differently. Because of this, the studio and chairman Tom Pollock specifically pleaded with him to change two things to make it more commercially viable. The first was not to do it in black and white, but Spielberg said hell no. They relented and said okay, but can you at least shoot it with color negative film so we can color some tapes later? Yet it was of course still a no. The other change Universal pushed for was to include some kind of a cathartic moment where Schindler threw his hands up in the air and uttered what he was feeling and how he just had to save everyone from the Nazis. And it was at this point that he respectfully told them to f*** off. Out of the 4 lists that exist today, 2 are in Yad Vashem, 1 is stored in the US Holocaust Museum, and the final one is, from what I found, currently unknown. The last time it was mentioned was back in 2017 when it went up for sale by Moments in Time for $2.4 million. I can't seem to find any mention in the document beyond that, so I'm guessing someone must have bought it.
The list is an absolute good. The list is life.
I think a common question people had was just what did the girl in the red coat represent? Other than the final scene, she's of course the only part of the film in color, which you can take a couple different ways. Spielberg said that he intended for it to symbolize how the people in power in the United States knew that the genocide was taking place, but did nothing to help. I sort of viewed the scene a bit differently. To me, it spoke to how in terrible events, like the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto, sometimes all it takes is one thing or one person to catch your attention to really make you emotionally invested and to see things from a human perspective. Another theory sees the red as the innocence of the Jewish people and the bloodshed they had to endure during the Holocaust. And in the film, the girl in red marks the beginning of Schindler's change, pushing him into fighting for his own subcamp. And then later, when he sees her for a second time, it's not long after that he gets the idea for the list. As one might expect from a Holocaust movie, almost every single Muslim country banned the film upon its release. The Malaysian Prime Minister called Schindler's List propaganda with the purpose of asking for sympathy, while others barred it on the basis of nudity and sex, though that was probably just a way for them to quietly ban the film without getting too political. If you didn't already know, the ending of Schindler's List featured the actors hand in hand with the Schindler Juden they portrayed. However, the scene itself never appears in the script, and it wasn't until about halfway through filming that they decided to include it. Spielberg envisioned it as a way to bring authenticity to the film as a whole, and because it was so last minute, locating all the survivors and bringing them together at one time was a bit of a challenge. And that hand at the end actually wasn't Spielberg's, but was rather Liam Neeson's. In regard to Spielberg's favorite movie to make, he bestows that honor upon E.T. And even though Schindler's List wasn't his favorite to make, simply because of the emotional roller coaster it took him on, he had this to say about it. I have never felt since Schindler's List the kind of pride and satisfaction and sense of real meaningful accomplishment. So I think it's fair to say his favorite film to make was E.T., while his favorite film he's made is Schindler's List.
Good help, God. One poor person. And I didn't.
To finish off the video, I just wanted to include a couple reactions from the first showing of Schindler's List in Germany.
Wie getrennt von die Familie. Kinder von den Eltern.
Ich kann nicht sagen. Es war einfach unglaublich.
Alright, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe for more content like this. And let me know in the comments what video you want to see me doing next. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.